Hi, I'm Patrice Gums, member of the coordinating team of USM's 10-10-10 lecture series. In the first episode, we met Dennis Richardson, who, in his former capacity as Lieutenant Governor, was instrumental in navigating the course that the country would take in achieving this new constitutional status. In the second, Dorn Bosch, President of the Central Bank, highlighted to us the importance of a sound fiscal and economic environment in the promotion and development of a good, sound country. In this, our third episode, we will introduce the concept of foreign affairs. Despite being something handled at the kingdom level, each and every country in the kingdom is encouraged to engage internationally with persons to help realize their strategic goals. Consequently, since 10-10-10, St. Martin, through the Department of Foreign Relations, has worked on cultivating the necessary relationships to position St. Martin as a reputable partner regionally and internationally. St. Martin is unique in that we don't always have to pull out a passport and catch a flight to engage internationally. A short drive away, despite the strong familial, historical, and cultural ties, is St. Martin, who we engage with as a foreign state, the French Republic. This very special relationship with our neighbors to the north makes St. Martin arguably the most valuable partner for St. Martin outside of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Needless to say, with our open border and free movement of people and goods, our economies and therefore the livelihood of our people are interwoven and highly interdependent. Now, here to discuss with us the very nature and essence of this relationship is Mr. Marcel Gums. As a former Prime Minister and liaison to the governments of both islands with links on both sides of the island, he is well placed to discuss and elucidate on this very dynamic and ever-evolving relationship.
Before 10-10-10, in the former Netherlands Antilles, on central government level, there was a department that restored under the Prime Minister in the Ministry of General Affairs, called Bureau of Foreign Relations. The Bureau dealt with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom, where it related to issues for the Netherlands Antilles and the islands separately. Matters like consular affairs, diplomatic requests from foreign countries, and other matters related to, for instance, situation of foreigners on the islands, would be dealt with through the Bureau of Foreign Affairs. The opportunity was there for the Netherlands Antilles to appoint its own attaché on their expense at Dutch embassies in the region. For a period of time, we had an attaché at the Dutch embassy in Washington, D.C., the Dutch embassy in Trinidad, and the Dutch embassy in the Dominican Republic. As an observer in Parliament of the Netherlands Antilles between July 1983 and December 1985, at every occasion we started bringing forward that St. Martin was half of an island and that the Netherlands Antilles at that time consisted of 5 1/2 of an island. The other half of the island was and still is part of the French Republic. After Aruba left the Netherlands Antilles in 1986, the narrative was changed to the Netherlands Antilles consisting of 4 1/2 of an island. As my colleague from Sable would brag that Sable was the highest mountain in the Kingdom of the Netherlands, we would brag that the kingdom shared and still shares a boundary with a superpower, the Republic of France, through St. Martin. The narrative that St. Martin was 1/2 of an island was simple to get the authorities in Willemstad and throughout the kingdom to understand how different and difficult it was and still is to govern a half island sharing an open border with a superpower. When it came to approving legislation for the introduction and or raising of taxes for the islands, we had to put up a fight against the other islands for them to understand that what works for the other islands will not work for St. Martin with an open border with French side. Comes to mind when it was decided to implement the law on establishing customs on St. Martin. The intention was to have customs introduced with import duties on certain products like on Curacao and Bonaire. After intensive debates, it was decided to go ahead and introduce customs to check and control on importation of drugs and other illegal products, leaving the implementation of import duties for the island territory, the local government, to decide, which never happened. Reason was that because of the open border, If you implement import duties, you will have to put customs control at the border with the French side. In the pioneering days of all fuel, gasoline, diesel, and gas, and kerosene were imported and stored on the Dutch side and later transported by tank trucks to the French side. No duties nor taxes were charged on import fuel on St. Martin. Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao, the ABC Islands, were already paying tax on fuel at the gas stations. When Aruba left in 1986, the pressure was applied on St. Martin to pay some duties on imported fuel. If the duties were applied at the gas stations on the Dutch side, then the sale of fuel on the French side, where there was no duty, would increase and the central government would lose revenues. Then leader of the Democratic Party, Mr. Claude Watty, under pressure from his coalition partners, came up with the idea to levy the tax on the fuel tanker when it drops its anchor in the bay at K Bay before discharging. This resulted in French side residents paying a tax for which they received no benefits. All this changed in the mid-90s when the central government raised the gasoline duty substantially, which resulted in the French side deciding to import their own gasoline in flexi tanks. Result was that Dutch side gas station lost huge market share to the French side, and fuel revenues on the Dutch side dropped substantially. In the late 90s, after seeing the hard facts, there was a change of policy and the central government reduced the duties on imported fuel from St. Martin. This resulted in market share returning to the Dutch side and increased revenue for the central government. I mentioned the gas station to illustrate how intertwined both sides of the islands are and how taking decisions without taking into consideration the other side of the island could be detrimental. Up until the late 1950s, there was no custom operated by the central government of the Netherlands Antilles on St. Martin. There was a custom checkpoint in Dutch Quarter, close to the present roundabout. Their responsibility was to check on citizens from the Dutch side who went to the French side and were returning loaded with rum. There was a tax on rum on the Dutch side, while on the French side, rum was tax-free. Eventually, the checkpoint guardhouse was closed and the officers returned to Curacao. The rum runners were passing through the hills of the main road. During and after the Second World War, there was truly little attention for the islands from France and the Netherlands. That changed in the mid-70s, the early 80s. The border, being an open border, has often gone through its own ways and means of abuse of the open border. We can recall back in the 80s the kidnappers of the Heineken president who flee to France after kidnapping and collecting their ransom. The plans were to bring them to St. Martin because there was no extradition treaty between France and the Netherlands. And the plan was to bring them to St. Martin French side and let them cross freely to the Dutch side, arrest them, and return them back to the Netherlands. Obviously, this plan was watched when a reporter reported it, and the whole plan fell and was not able to be executed. That is what I would call an abuse of the open border with no control at all at it.
Management and staff of Phillipsburg Auto Accessories wishes you and yours the very best for 2021.
GEBE has been faithfully serving the communities of St. Martin, powering your home and our economy. Come rain or shine, our qualified team of professionals are working hard 24 hours a day to provide you and your family with safe, reliable electricity and water. We use the latest technologies and test our products daily to maintain the highest international standards. Our friendly staff is always there to assist you, whether in person, over the phone, or online. We are committed to constantly improving our products and services, making them more efficient, effective, and environmentally friendly to serve you better today and our next generation of clients tomorrow. GEBE, powering a brighter future.
Our friend Megawati is here with tips to save you energy. 1. Turn your airco temperature up. 2. Use a ceiling fan instead. 3. Buy energy-saving products. Save some green with NVGEBE.
I have some questions for you, Ava. First of all, I want to ask you a few things. Why only yesterday did we start the antigen pilot testing? I mean, it's a long time we've been saying it. The airport said they started it. Why only now among the community? And the other thing I'd like to ask you, because you mentioned it in your speech, and I want to tell you that 2 weeks ago, I saw something very daring on 80 Village Road as I was driving by. Almost every bar and building there was full of people and nobody had on their mask. So I'm wondering, what is it exactly in place for controls? There's crowds, people are not respecting the COVID guidelines, and I'm not seeing inspectors out there giving people fines as it was announced. So if you can tell me why did it take so long to implement the piloting of the antigen test, and what exactly are we doing to control and make sure that the COVID guidelines are being respected everywhere?
Thank you for your question, Michelle. So basically, to answer your first question, why only now did we start piloting antigen tests? So I just wanted to provide a point of clarification. Antigen testing is not being conducted at the airport. Antigen tests is currently now accepted as a form for travel, much like the 5-day PCR. What I will say is that we have done our due diligence in terms of looking at the validity of antigen testing and using it appropriately based on the population at hand. So right now, we had, piloted this initiative with a case definition. So we wanted to only look at those persons that were symptomatic and those persons who were known. You need to be very careful with how you adapt and utilize antigen testing. So we have been, studies have shown, and the advice, even on some of the packaging for antigen tests, indicate that you should not be using antigen tests for mass testing, especially in populations where prevalence is low. And so for St. Martin, where we are still trying to find out what our prevalence is of COVID-19, we don't want to end up implementing a mass testing strategy. It's almost like trying to find a needle in a haystack. So we have been very calculated with how we want to utilize these antigen tests. And so this is why I mentioned in my opening remarks that we want to utilize it for persons who are symptomatic, for persons in quarantine who are now eligible for testing on day 10. So to be able to have a closed definition of how we want to adapt antigen testing into our strategy, to make sure that we aren't misleading the community and just using it as a blanket or a canvas solution for all. So there has to be a calculated application of the antigen test and how you're going to utilize it in your population. Now, your second question around what can be done for adhering to the public health measures. So, unfortunately, as CPS, I'm an implementing agency, but I have no authority to enforce public health measures. So, this is where I've tried to leverage the Council of Ministers and my colleagues within the government sphere to try to find ways that we can implement and reinforce public health measures. So on the one hand, for me and my team, we are always saying you need to adhere to the public health measures, wearing your mask, social distance. But when it comes to inspection and the follow-up, that falls outside of my domain. And so, I would look to the other ministries to also try to help CPS in executing and making sure that businesses follow through with having the signage, with ensuring that patrons to their restaurants or grocery stores wear their masks and adhere to the measures, because we cannot simply do it on our own. And the minister also alluded to the fact that if we wanted to adhere, or if we wanted to implement more rigid measures, it's not as simple as changing the legislation. There has to be certain things put into place before that can be taken.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Lycida Weaver, and thank you, Bibi, for the question. Bibi, point of clarification. You need to unmute yourself, please.
Yes, can I get a follow-up? I just want to ask her, because I'm taking notes as she speaks. What I need to ask you spoke about the possibility of a curfew. How soon do you expect, government to implement this curfew, or how needed is this?
So that's out of my hands. As an implementation agency, I have advised these measures to the Council of Ministers because of what I am seeing. So, I'm not advising these measures as a scare tactic, but rather I look at my staff internally to see what our healthcare capacity is. And I can tell you that, when we're doing source and contact tracing, the amount of effort it takes to conduct source and contact tracing effectively is somewhere along 8 hours per case. So if you multiply that, today alone, we have 24 cases. You can see how it constantly escalates to the amount of manpower hours required. And so, coupled with, fortunately for the healthcare sector, SMMC has their numbers at bay where they're not at a threshold. But when I look at public health and CPS as the agencies leading the COVID response, these are some of the things that I've recommended to my superiors and to the Council of Ministers, with the hope that they also recognize the fact that there needs to be something to curtail, whether it's nightlife or to curtail some of the activities that are happening after hours. But that, again, is not up to me. I've done my due diligence in making sure that I've informed the necessary persons that need to be informed of such.
The difference between the professionals, and I brought all the professionals so that the media can ask them all questions free, no restraint. There is a difference between what professionals do and what those that are in charge of governing a country have to take in consideration. As minister, I do not think about different things than the health for the health part of the population. But as part of the totality of government, it is said, and it's said again and again, not only in St. Martin, but all over. You have to balance out the health situation and the rest of the situation of the country you have to deal with. In this case, the economic financial situation of the country. Just like experience have taught us that PCR was in the beginning one of the best method to to test and is still the one that we keep the most, we can also start using now the antigen test. I would like to express a word of caution because I see there that people see business opportunity and start almost over the counter selling the possibility of testing, and people, the human character is like that. If you can tell me what I would like to hear, it will magnify what I'm thinking, and I will continue acting as I do. The mere fact that you go and pay whatever you pay by whoever is not within the constellation that is here today, you have to understand that the fact that they tell you negative, except of the percentage that are false negatives or false positives and all those kind of things, it is a split second or two time indication of your situation. So if you do it now, that don't mean that an hour after that you didn't get infested with the disease. Coming back to the question of Mr. Shaw, yes, I get the information, and with the information that I get, I have to make choices. And choices that I make is about the comprehensive of the whole community. The community have to understand. And yes, sometimes there are people that tell me, it looks like there are some that are pushing for the lockdown. But I want to remember we all passed through it in the beginning of the year when we had to do the lockdown, and how everybody was very agitated about the situation. They couldn't go out and buy the necessities and all those kind of things. Besides that, let's hope and do our part that it don't have to become, we don't have to lock down, because it's no use. Locking down means people are not working. People that are not working cannot provide food on the table. And that is also another health issue that we will have to deal with. So I will beg everybody, please, do your part, behave, adhere to the protocols, and let's give the other one a chance of health to be able to breathe and live. It's not only about yourself, but it's about the collectivity of everybody together. Thank you.
Management and staff of Phillipsburg Auto Accessories wishes you and yours the very best for 2021.
The innovative Banco Matico contactless smart card. Your Banco Matico smart card is now equipped with a contactless feature for payments, so get ready to tap and go. Contactless payments are fast, easy, secure, and accepted worldwide at all Maestro-enabled contactless terminals. Tap for transactions equivalent to or less than 100 NAF, or the US dollar equivalent. You will receive notifications via email anytime you tap. Tap, tap, and pay fast. Fast with WIB. For more information, visit our website at wib-bank.net. Tap and go with your partner in progress.
And if I may direct that question to the Prime Minister, yesterday during the press conference of CPS, the head of CPS stated that there was a cluster in the banking industry, the justice sector, so is the medical sector and the yachting sector as well. You have addressed that, Prime Minister, but I need to know specifically what are the recommendations coming from CPS in order to better deal with the situation of St. Martin in relation to the increase of COVID-19.
Thank you for the question. The clusters, how they determine clusters if you have 3 or more infections. Prior to the last update, there were clusters in restauranting, in open air nightclub, I believe. Minister, you can correct me, Tiat. As they mentioned, the medical field, yachting industry. And I directly spoke to 1 or 2 of the, let's call it, entrepreneurs in one of those areas, and they are doing what they have to do. But if you're in a space, for instance, in an open air restaurant / playing loud music, that has been happening more and more all over, and one person is infected with loud music, you have a tendency to be up in each other's faces, etc. And that's why we're saying wear a mask. Wearing a mask stops the spread. You have to take a sip, you remove your mask, you take your sip, you put it back on. But when the music is loud, people want to talk over the music. I can't hear the person whose voice is muffled behind a mask, and then the mask comes off. And as people drink a little more, they become a little looser. So that happens. The cluster within, let's call it the medical area, isn't necessarily that it was spread in that medical area, just like teachers getting it, other people who are working and out and about are getting it, and then they're detected. And if 3 or 4 people within the same area have it, it's called a cluster. So we have clusters everywhere. We have community spread. What CPS is recommending is that the protocols be upheld, and that's why we are being stricter as of last week with our enforcement. That has been recommended. CPS also requested that we go backwards in the opening hours of businesses. Government is not prepared to do that at this time. However, it is still an option for the future if the spread continues to grow. It's been going down and going up, going down and going up. So as long as the recoveries continue and it is not over a certain amount per day that are being infected, we will maintain as is. If we need to go stricter as per the recommendations of CPS, we will do so. So they recommended going back in the hours. They recommended even a curfew once the business is closed. And why is that? Because once the business is closed, what we have noticed and the police were challenged with is that persons would open up their cars, play their music loud, and continue to party in the streets. What are we seeing then? More traffic accidents as well. So I'm asking the people of St. Martin to be more disciplined, avoid this so that we can remain open. Or else we may have to very well heed the caution that has been put forth by our medical professionals.